Hey, welcome. Glad you're here. Good morning. Welcome to New Break OB. Carter Moss, pastor here. How many people have heard of Bethany Hamilton? How many know? How many knew her before you just saw this video? Oh, just kidding. All right. Awesome. I mean, we came out this weekend. I can't recommend it because I haven't seen it yet, but the trailer, I love the trailer anyway, and I've heard it's really good if you want to see it. Fascinating story. It's an awesome lady. They made a movie about her life, not a documentary, but one where someone else portrayed her called Soul Surfer. Was out several years ago. If you saw that, Carrie Underwood is in it, and Dennis Quaid, so some big names. I saw it with my daughter, one of my favorite dad-daughter dates with her. Great movie, and this is kind of a follow-up, actual documentary, as you can see. And it's her as she's older, like actually becoming a mom as well. But yeah, fascinating lady. She's just passionate about Jesus. Has super strong faith. They portray that in Soul Surfer. You see her in her youth group. Carrie Underwood is her youth group leader, which would be a pretty cool youth group leader to have. And in the movie and all that stuff. So faith plays a big role, and obviously super just kind of persevering girl. She was actually in PB yesterday at South Coast Surf Shop. So I didn't have time to go over there. One of our New Break pastors made it over there. Got his picture taken with her. And yeah, just kind of doing a tour about the movie. And she loves inspiring young girls, inspiring people with physical challenges, and really just kind of inspiring everybody, just not to give up. I mean, it's just pretty incredible to just push through and just kind of be, relentless in what she does, even though something could have just totally held her back from it. So I love that about her story, but I also love that in her story that it's really the reminder to us that that's what our God is like. Our God is unstoppable too. He's relentless. He keeps coming after us with love, coming after us with grace, with forgiveness. Even when we hit challenges in our life, he still says, hey, you're not out of the game yet. You're not done yet. You're not too old. You're not too young. You're not too poor. You're not too uneducated. You don't have too much baggage in your past. He would say, I keep coming after you. That's why we like to sing about his overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love, relentless kind of love. And so that's what our God is like. And maybe you just needed that reminder. Maybe you've never known that. I mean, maybe honestly you sit here and go, well, that sounds nice, Carter. That hasn't been my experience. It's hard to follow a God that I can't see, I can't really hear, and honestly, sometimes I don't even know if he's there, if he is relentless. Maybe he has given up on me. If you've ever felt that or just needed the reminder, I'm glad you're here today. Because if God is relentless in that, how do we be relentless in letting him work in our lives? I think it really just comes down to this one word that's so key. It might be like the key to the whole Christian life. So simple to understand, but man, so hard to do. And it's the word trust. Trust, right? So hard to trust to God. You can't see. Trust to God you don't hear from. Trust when it feels like prayers aren't being answered. Trust when it feels like stuff in life's going harder more days than it's not. I think about for Bethany, man, I mean, how did she even get back in the water after that? I mean, in case you don't know the story, she lost her arm in a shark attack. And so I was just walking on the OB Pier on Friday night with my wife pretty late at night, a lot of people fishing, and we watched somebody reel in actually a baby shark. I mean, it was only like this size, but I mean, it was really cool, and I posted a photo on my social media, and just kind of fun to watch. I'll be honest, and you can make fun of me for it, but watching that, they pulled it out right under the pier, I'm like, I kind of don't want to go swimming anymore in this ocean right there, because he pulled that out. No joke. On the other side of the pier, a guy just pulled out a little stingray, and some of you have been stung, and you're like, no big deal. If I ever get stung, I'm not going back in the water for at least 5 to 10 years. I'm just kind of wimpy like that. I didn't grow up around the ocean. So, I mean, that's just crazy to think about those things in there. And Bethany, man, gets back in the water. And keeps training, keeps training, even though no one really has ever shown that it's even possible to be able to paddle out deep, but only do it with one arm. I would think you go in circles, but she's figured it out, right? And so she really had this trust. She just felt like God isn't done with me yet. This is still what God wants to do in my life. And she had to wrestle with that a lot. You see, I don't know if they portray it in this documentary, but in Soul Surfer, you definitely see this whole idea of kind of wrestling with her faith and kind of what's God doing to me, and am I supposed to give this thing up? So if you've ever felt that, Glad you're here. So we have a great story today, another true story. Bethany's a great true story. Got another awesome true story out of the Old Testament. It's actually a story, though, that Jesus actually talked about. He mentions in Luke chapter 4, references the story, and it's actually one I've never gotten to speak on before. So if you've never heard it before, it'll be our first time together. But no, awesome story. Guy named Naaman. And also about a guy named Elisha. That's who we've been studying here this summer, at least in July. In June, we were looking at a prophet of God named Elijah, just to be confusing. But he was a guy struggled with doubt, struggled with faith. We actually talked about struggle with burnout even. And you can watch any of those messages online if you missed them, or just read in 1 Kings or read a story. After Elijah, though, we read last week, as he actually, his life on earth ends, he gets taken into heaven. He actually passes ministry down to his young apprentice, to Elisha, and now he's a prophet. He's called in this story the man of God, because at this time, he's the man right now, and so he's the man of God, and he also has to struggle with trust in God, and faith and doubt, and all these kinds of things. So, powerful story about Naaman, and I just wanted you to hear it because even though it's an old story and it is a true story, it's just got a whole lot to do with our lives here in San Diego in 2019. Starts like this. Naaman was a commander of the army of the king of Aram. We have a lot of military around here. He's military. I mentioned to you 4th of July week, I got to watch a guy from our campus become commander of one of the ships here in San Diego. So he's the commander, pretty high rank. He's a great man in the sight of his master. He's highly regarded. Through him, the Lord had given lots of victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but, there's always a but, right? There's always a but. He's a valiant soldier, well-respected, but he had leprosy. Had this debilitating disease. We'll talk in a minute more what that is. So he has leprosy. It says, now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and taken captive a young girl from Israel. So it turns out that the raiders have been doing bad things for centuries. So we shouldn't be surprised. Sorry, there's just an Oakland Raiders joke. I'll take it back. And she served Naaman's wife. She's basically a victim of human trafficking. She got kidnapped and forced into slavery for Naaman's wife. So he's a good guy, but also has some dark stuff. She said to her mistress, to his wife, if only my master would go see the prophet who's in Samaria, he could cure him of his leprosy. So Naaman went. He went to his master, his king is the boss, and he told him what the girl from Israel had said. By all means go, the king of Aram replied. I'll even send a letter to the king of Israel, so he knows why you're coming. So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, a bunch of gold, a bunch of clothing. We'll talk in a little bit why he did that. The letter he took to the king of Israel read, with this letter, I'm sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of leprosy. As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes, as people do when they're either grieving or he gets super angry. Says, am I God? Can I kill people and bring them back to life? Who is this fellow to send someone to me and expect me to cure them from leprosy? See, he's just trying to pick a quarrel with me. So he freaks out. Sounds like he's totally misunderstanding, right? The motives here. But he's all upset. So when Elisha, the man of God, heard how upset the king was that he'd torn his robes, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have this man come to me, and then he'll know there's a prophet in Israel. We'll pause right there in the story because some really important stuff, and I promise this has something to do with your life, your faith journey here. Whether you have been walking with God for a long time in your life, we still can sometimes feel like, is God still relentless? Does he still remember me? Is he still coming after me? Or if you're brand new to the whole thing, don't know who God is yet, or not even sure if you believe in him while he's chasing and coming after you. There's important stuff in here. But how do we learn to just trust? It's really our hard thing to trust this God that we can't see, we can't hear. Well, it starts by this. Got to get to this place where we really understand and believe who our God is. And we talk about this a lot around here, that our God has a seat for everyone at his table. Part of what's been cool with these Old Testament stories is in the Old Testament, God had kind of a group of people that were known as God's chosen people, the Israelites. They were the ones God chose to work in and work through. You're going to be my examples of what it looks like to follow God. Yet, in the middle of that is all these stories of outsiders, non-Israelites. One of Elijah's stories, he's sent to a widow in another country, and widows, very sadly, were at the bottom of the totem pole back then. A widow in a foreign land, and Elijah is sent to her, and God works powerfully in her life. He even raises her son from the dead, the very first resurrection in the Bible. So if we ever wonder, man, what does God do for all those people in the third world countries who have never heard about him? Right? Like, does God just forget about them? Are they just destined to just never know him? We read those stories and go, no, God sees those people. He has ways of going after them. And then we read in this story, Naaman, he's not an Israelite either. He's a Syrian. And so he's another foreigner guy. Now he's a man, which sadly back then also very elevated, and at the top of military. So part of what's cool is we see that God goes after everybody. If you're someone in here, you're successful, maybe you're high up military, owning your own business, made something of yourself, kind of made a name, God sees you. And he goes after you, he values you like Naaman. If you're someone who sits in here and feels like, well, I don't know, maybe I am one of the forgotten. I feel like the outsider. I feel kind of nobody notices me. Then you know God goes after you, like he does the widow. So that's what's cool when we see all these stories. See, God is always relentless in his love. No matter your age, your life stage, your walk of life, your past baggage, whatever it is, God is full of grace. He has a seat for us at his table. But it's not just enough to know that God includes us, but we also have to know whether we even need him, whether we even want him. For Naaman, it'd be easy to say, I've already won a bunch of medals and in the army because I'm commander, I've had a bunch of victories. I'm a self-made man, so I don't really need the crutch of religion. I don't need some God. But he had this thing that reminds him of his need for God. For him, it's leprosy. And leprosy, in case you didn't know, it's like a skin disease, which, those can be pretty nasty. There's a TV show. I don't know if you've seen it yet or not. Has anyone ever seen this new show called Dr. Pimple Popper? Have you ever seen this show? Have you seen it? Listen, if you haven't seen it, please don't ever watch it. I'm telling you right now, I'm serious. Don't go watch it. You will regret it. I know you're going to go home now and try to look it up. I'm just saying, don't say I didn't warn you. Seriously, I've only made about 20 seconds. It's about the longest I can make it because it's just really zoomed in and high def camera and just showing pretty nasty things taken care of on people's skin, all sorts of different places. Now, I've heard if you actually watch the whole episode, it's actually some beautiful stories, right? People that have these things, those can be, if not hurtful health-wise, at least really hard kind of self-esteem in those things, and this doctor helps restore that, which is beautiful. I'm just saying it's a painful, uncomfortable thing to watch. And that's leprosy, though. I mean, it would kind of make your skin crawl. It really eats away at skin. Actually, people eventually just lose limbs. And their limbs literally just fall off. Now, Bethany lost a limb because of a shark, but this would be just like losing your limbs. And it eventually eats away enough at you that it just kills you. So if you're trying to be a commander in an army and you have this thing eating away at you, your job's pretty limited. I mean, once the first limb's gone, your career's probably over, and you're on a ticking clock. He's going to die from it. Now, a lot of Bible scholars think, even though normally you can see people with leprosy, highly contagious, by the way. So it's almost like if there's a leper anywhere on your street, everybody would move out of the apartment complex or the street because it's so contagious and you don't want any piece of that at all. And so, but some Bible scholars wonder if Naaman if this was his secret pain. Because even though he had leprosy, it's usually visible. Commanders in the army, they're always wearing full armor. And so even when he's out in public, he's in this full, gleaming, glistening armor. People are just looking at him, look at that great, strong commander. He goes home at night and strips off the armor and has to look in the mirror. And he knows the secret pain that no one else knows. Maybe he's terrified that if they ever found out, my career's over. They say that it probably had to be secret because no one would want to fight in his army with him. Because when you're in battle, I mean, you're rubbing up against each other. There's sweat and blood going on people, highly contagious. I mean, the king knew, obviously. His servant girl, she lives in his house, but, they say maybe this was his secret thing that he carries around. And I got to ask you a hard question. Might be an uncomfortable question. But if you'll answer it, I think God can really use this story in your life. What is your leprosy? I mean, what is that thing in your life? And maybe it is visible and you feel like it is the thing everybody knows about me. Or maybe for you, it's the secret thing that you'd say, yeah, if anybody found out, be done. You don't know, Carter. People just knew. And maybe it's something in your past. Just like people knew this about my past. Something in your present. Maybe it's a physical thing. Maybe mental. Maybe emotional. Maybe just a piece of baggage, addiction, recovery thing. Think about maybe sometimes it's what's the thing that you like least about yourself? I know it's not a very fun question. But just think honestly about it. What do you like least about yourself? What do you think and assume that God likes least about you? That will always keep you at a distance from Him. And I don't stir this up in you to make you feel bad. I want to stir it up because if we'll really just kind of be brutally honest with ourselves, you don't have to tell anybody else right now, just be honest with yourself, and God can do something with it, though. Right? If you'll think about what it is. Mother Teresa, by the way, she said, biggest disease today isn't leprosy. It's actually feeling unwanted. And maybe that is that secret thing for you, kind of the unwanted, the unlovable, am I going to be alone the rest of my life? Those kind of things. Whatever it is, when you can relate to Naaman, he carries this thing around, potentially the secret pain. So we got to admit it. We got to understand this need for God, because as long as you're just a self-made person that doesn't really need anything or anybody, then there's not really room for God to work. So just think about what that is for you. If you don't have anything at all, well, I'd really like to meet you because I haven't met anybody that doesn't carry around something like that. So once we know what it is, all right, let's get to the good stuff. Well, what do we do about it? How do I really invite God in to do some healing, to do some powerful work? Well, we got to be willing to listen. We talk all the time here, let God speak to us through all sorts of ways, through the Bible, and hope He speaks through me or people up here when you're here, and I hope through your life groups. And He can speak lots of things in our lives, and sometimes speaks through really unexpected places, unexpected voices. You think about it in this story, I mean, it would make sense for Naaman to get advice of how to go get healed if the king had told him, hey, I heard my buddy, the king over in Israel, knows someone who can heal you. You should go. He'd say, yes, sir, I'll go, right? Or if his wife gave him advice, I would hope that Naaman's smart enough to listen to his wife's advice, because wife's advice is always correct 100%, and he should always listen. But it didn't come from any of those people. It came from, again, sadly, societally back then, like the bottom of the totem pole. I mean, the slave girl to your wife. I'm guessing they've never had a conversation ever in their life. And you think about it from her perspective, by the way. She was captured. She's a slave because Naaman captured her. At least some of his soldiers did. So wouldn't you, if you're her, aren't you thinking, this is the guy that captures me. I've watched what he's done to all my people, maybe all my family, and now he's suffering? Good, right? I'm going to sit back and watch this show, right? I'm going to just watch this guy slowly die and suffer. Isn't that how we think sometimes? Get a little taste of his own medicine. We got a nice word for it, by the way, karma. Little right? You're out there kidnapping people and taking over country. Serves you right? That's how we like things to work. Bad things happen to bad people, and we're going to let them happen. But she speaks up. How does she set this need for just low revenge? I just want to watch him suffer a little bit. Maybe you've had that. I hope so, because otherwise I'm the only one who's thought that about people that have hurt me. I just want to suffer a little bit. And she could sit back and watch. She sets that aside, risks her life probably by speaking up and says, I know how you can be healed. I'm just saying, that's some compassion. Side note. But anyway, so she speaks up and does that. And the fact that he listens to her, I mean, honestly, he could have, right? Who are you? Give me advice. Second, she says it. She says, all right, I'm going to the king and ask if I can go see this guy in Israel and see if I can get healed. I mean, he's probably pretty desperate, but he listens. Are you willing to let God speak to you through anybody? How about people younger than you? How about people that are older than you? How about people of totally different walk of life? How about people of the other political party than you? Ooh, that's a tough one, right? How about people of the rival team to you? How about people who you totally disagree with? Even people that have hurt you. Are we willing to listen? Let God speak? You know, you see in the Soul Surfer movie with Bethany, she lets God speak into her through her youth leader. Now, I get that doesn't sound that drastic and unexpected, but at the time, she didn't want to hear it. She was kind of done with that, like, I don't need all your advice. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. And Carrie Underwood, the great youth leader, really challenges her, and she's willing to listen. I think about some of the unexpected people God has used in my life. There's a guy I mentioned before, used to be a neighbor to the church here, and used to always kind of be angry at us and stuff, taking up parking spots on Sundays and stuff. And but since then he lives elsewhere in OB, and we get together like monthly. He just reaches out, hey, let's catch up. And he's actually a new dad, and but he just doesn't really have any interest in really ever coming to church. And I try to keep friendships like that. And so we do that when we hang out. And one of the times we're just talking about kind of some of the homelessness in OB, because it's just a very complex issue in this community. And so I just told him, so I was trying to figure out, because I know as Jesus followers, we're meant to show love and compassion, but you also got to do it in ways that don't totally alienate the whole town. And, I'm trying to bring all the sides together. And he actually starts kind of preaching at me. And he's like, I don't know. It sounds to me like, honestly, if you think that that's what Jesus would do, you should just not care what anybody thinks and just go love people the way Jesus would love them. And I'm just like, whoa, God's using this guy to preach to me? I thought I was here to preach something to him. And I needed to hear it. And it was really good. It was humbling to have to get challenged on someone who, just think very different about a lot of stuff with. And so we still hang out and meet together, try to learn from each other. Who is God trying to speak into your life? And we get defensive and prideful, whatever, been hurt by them before, whatever the deal is. But will you let them speak into you? If we'll listen to what God's doing, start to let him work in our lives and these things, then here's where it gets tough. A lot of us get stuck right here. We start to kind of misinterpret the things God's trying to do in our life. I think that's sort of this crazy side note in this story, that the king of Israel, gets this letter. I sent this guy to you to cure him of leprosy. And he just totally reads it wrong, right? Totally flips out. Like, who's this guy? Will you send to me someone? I'm not God. I can't cure people of leprosy. He's just trying to pick a fight. He's just trying to prove to everybody that I'm just a lame king who can't do anything and turns away people that are physically suffering. Like, no, dude, you totally missed it. That's not at all what's happening. Right? He's actually given an opportunity for you to actually show God's power, by pointing them to Elisha and all this. And I just wonder how often, man, it's so easy to misinterpret what God's doing, because all we know is our own kind of mindset, so we project that onto God. And we think, well, God must work the way humans work. God works the way the American economy works, or whatever it is. And we just start assuming that's how God works. Here's one of the most common misinterpretations, by the way. We don't have time to go through them all. That'd be a different sermon. But let's at least tackle the most common one that I think happens with people that have been a Christian a long time, people that don't even believe necessarily in God, and they still all land on the same spot of when pain or suffering or hard things happen in our lives, we jump right to God must be punishing them, right? God's punishing me. I knew it. He's mad at me. He's punishing me. Bad things happen. School shootings or natural disasters. And always some church on the TV going, see, God's punishing those people, right? Because every time bad things happen, it's a punishment from God. Did you know Jesus was asked about that once? There was a man born blind from birth, and the teachers of the law who should know better say, so Jesus, who was God punishing by delivering this blind human being? Was God punishing the man himself? Which, I don't know, I guess he would have committed a bunch of sins in the womb. I don't know how you would do that. I guess my wife, when she's pregnant, would say, well, they do step on your bladder and stuff and make things very uncomfortable. So I don't know if that counts as lots of sin or not. But anyway, is he being punished? Or are they punishing his parents? So that's pretty sad, right? To think that God would ever actually use a baby as a punishment to somebody. But that's how they thought. Is that what God's doing, punishing the parents? You're going to have a blind kid. You know what Jesus' answer is? He says, neither one's being punished. It's not a punishment at all. He says, you know why this guy's blind? So you get to see the power of God. And Jesus heals him. You know why bad things happen? I don't know. Because it's different every time. So different stuff's always happening, right? Sometimes they just happen as a result of my own stupid choices, and I just brought pain onto myself. And sometimes they happen to us because somebody else made a sinful choice, and you ended up on the receiving end, abuse, things like that. Sometimes they happen because our world's broken. Sometimes they happen because God's disciplining people. Sometimes they happen because I'm supposed to learn something about God, and sometimes they don't have anything to do with God. But we all want to jump right to, see, I know what God's doing. He's punishing. God's doing. I would just say, listen, we don't know. Bethany Hamilton could have said, why is God punishing me? Why doesn't he like me? He took the one thing I'm passionate about, surfing, and then took away something from me so that I couldn't ever do it again. And you think about how many times people say, God took this person from me, took my job from me, took my marriage from me, and we all kind of blame it on God as a punishment. But instead of Bethany being bitter the rest of her life, she says, well, I don't know why God did it. I don't even know if it's from him, but I know this. He still calls me to do this, and I'm going to trust. And so she moves forward in trust. That'd be my challenge to you. Can you do that? Trust means I don't always understand his ways, but I'll move forward anyway. The Apostle Paul, he struggled with something in his life. We don't know. It probably wasn't leprosy, but it was something in his life, and we don't ever get to know. So it's fun to kind of guess and watch Bible scholars try to debate it. He just says, I have this thorn in my flesh. And some people say it's like a physical ailment, maybe some early like cancer he could never get rid of. Some say, this constant annoying thing in his life was like a mother-in-law or something. I mean, they just kind of debate what it is. There's no Bible scholars that say that. But some do say it's like a person in his life who just always attacking him, wouldn't leave him alone. We don't know what he is. And he even says, maybe he said, I prayed that God would take it away. And every time God says, no, I will not take it away. Whoa. You didn't know that Paul has felt what you felt. I prayed for God to fix this, and he won't fix it. Finally, Paul landed at a beautiful spot. And I got to be honest with you, I read these words a lot lately. And I pray through them a lot lately because I have weaknesses about myself that frustrate me and get in the way. And so I'm just like, all right, guy, I come back to 2 Corinthians 12, and Paul says this. It sounds just like Jesus' answer to those people, by the way. He says, I'm not going to fix it for you. You know why, Paul? Because my grace is all you need. My grace is all you need. My power actually works best in your weakness, as Jesus said. He's blind because you're about to see the power of God. Now, Paul says, now I'm glad to actually boast about my weaknesses. I brag about them because that way Jesus gets to work through me. He doesn't only boast about them, he takes pleasure in his weaknesses, hardship, persecution, because every time he gets to do any of that, it shows how weak he is and how strong God is. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not as spiritually mature as Paul yet. I don't take pleasure in my weaknesses yet. I don't take pleasure when I get persecuted or have hardships yet, but I'm getting closer to understanding, okay, but here's a chance for God to show his power, right? Chance for his power to be displayed. Where we're weak, he's strong. Maybe you've never known a dependence on God, but if you'll bring your weakness to him, maybe instead of that one thing about us we like the least about ourselves, like I asked earlier, we start to say, that thing still drives me crazy sometimes, but I like it because it always reminds me of God. It always keeps him close to me because that's the area I depend on him the most. That will catapult your trust in God a long ways, and we can do it in our hardships and in our weaknesses. So that's what Paul was able to do and Jesus was able to do, and hopefully Naaman was able to do. So the king says, sorry, I can't help you, but you can go see this guy Elisha. So let me tell you how Naaman responds next. So Naaman went. Again, he's got just enough trust. He went with his horses and chariots, stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha, by the way, doesn't even come to answer the door. He sends a messenger out to say to Naaman, go wash yourselves 7 times in the Jordan, and then your flesh will be restored and you'll be cleansed. That's great news, right? He says, you're going to be healed. Here's all you got to do. Let's go wash yourself. Boom, done. Naaman should be excited. Next verse. But Naaman went away angry. He's mad. He says, I thought surely Elisha would come out to me, stand, call on the name of the Lord as God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. But instead, are not these other rivers of Damascus better than the Jordan, all those waters of Israel? Because they thought those waters were kind of nasty. Couldn't I just wash in those and be cleansed? He turned off and went away in a rage. He's ticked off. You know why? Not just misinterpreting, because we hate it when God doesn't work the way we know he should work. Right? I mean, Naaman knows. He's like, listen, I know how this healing thing works. Elisha comes out, waves his hand over it, says a couple magic words. God comes down, boom, I'm healed. What's with this? Now I got to go on another journey, go get wet in this water, do it 7 times in a... Are you just messing with me here? Right? I know how this is supposed to work. How often do we say that? God, I know how this is supposed to work. What are you doing? By the way, we should not be surprised that God's ways don't make sense because he already told us that they won't. Another great prophet, Isaiah, in chapter 55, he says this. He says, God speaks through him and says, by the way, about as high as heaven is above the earth, about that high, that's how high my thoughts are above your thoughts and my ways are above your ways. In other words, my puny brain isn't going to understand a whole lot of the time what God is doing. Right? And just so you know, as a guy, former computer programmer who wants to figure out how everything works, I have a very logical brain, so that's very hard for me. I've actually gotten to where I'm okay with some mystery in my faith. Because if I'm going to give my life to somebody, they better be a whole lot smarter than me. If I can kind of figure out everything they're doing, I don't really need them, honestly. I'll just go to the smartest person I know for advice. I want to follow a God who's way above the smartest person or counselor that I know. And so God's thoughts and ways won't always make sense, but will we trust them anyway? His ways. Back to Bethany real quick. You know, God's ways don't make sense. I honestly don't know even if she knows the why now. Why did I have to lose my arm or anything? But she's starting to discover what God can do with it. One of her best quotes I read, I don't know if it's in the movie or not, she says this, I've now learned that I can embrace way more people with just one arm than I ever did when I had 2. You know? Doesn't get to always understand why did it happen, but does get to understand, but what is God going to do with it? I don't know all the why of everything in your life, but I know this, God's relentless and will do something with it when you let him, right? Instead, we get angry. God, you don't make any sense, God. You don't make any sense. Your ways aren't my ways. How am I supposed to get ahead of my job when you're always telling me I'm supposed to be humble and elevate other people? Right? How am I supposed to, you tell me to live this generous life? God, I don't know if you've seen the gas prices and the housing prices and rent here in San Diego lately, but there's no living generously here. Your ways don't make any sense, right? I've said to God, your timing doesn't make sense. Like, we have to act right now, God. You got to act now. What's with this waiting thing? But will we trust, submit to God's ways even when they don't make sense? Right? Will we trust him even when they don't make sense? Naaman, he's got to decide here. He's ticked off. I've been on this whole journey. Think how humbling this journey is for him. It's like, all right, I already got this thing. I got to travel to a country I've already taken over. Talk to their king. That's not enough. Now I got to go to the house of this prophet out in the middle, wherever. Goes there. Then he doesn't even answer the door. He sends his messenger. This would be like Bill Belichick, famed coach of the Patriots. I think he has like 89 Super Bowl rings now or something. And like someone telling him, you know who's going to give you some really good football coaching advice? You need to go to this guy who coaches junior high football in the middle of Iowa and just go to his house and ask him for advice. And so Bill humbles himself to do it, knocks on the door, and the guy won't even come. He sends the water boy out to give the advice. All right? That's like how kind of humiliating it is for this great commander of the army. And now it's, go to the Jordan. Well, that's nasty water anyway. Why can't I just go to the water in my own country? You make me go through this rigmarole thing 7 times in a row. What's he going to do? He's angry. So people try to speak in his life again. His servants this time, again, unexpected voices. Servants are there to serve. You only, when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you kind of thing. And so he doesn't care what the servants have to say, but they speak up to him. All right? And so they're going to challenge him and speak into him. And they say, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, wouldn't you have done that? How much more then when he tells you, just wash and be cleansed? They're like, just go do it then. So he went. Again, remember, he's got anger, but he trusts. He has doubt, but he trusts. He keeps trusting. He keeps going one little step at a time. So he went down, dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored, and he became clean. It worked. His small acts of trust led to big things that God did in his life. Right? Over and over. Even when he's mad and confused at God, all right, but I'll trust you anyway. Your ways don't make sense, but I'll trust anyway. Is that what we do? Will we do that? I wonder what it was like. It's okay to use, we're allowed to use our spiritual imagination a little bit with the Word of God and, just kind of filling in some of the details. He has to dip in this water 7 times. What did Naaman look like the 6th time he got up out of the water? I mean, the story doesn't make it sound as I read that it's like this gradual kind of healing. I mean, who knows, but it doesn't say. So it's possible that the 6th time he comes out of the water and looks at the leprosy, nothing's changed. Right? And imagine him just sitting there thinking, I knew this was stupid. Right? I mean, what the heck am I wasting my time doing? 7 times the stupid water, and, maybe his servants are sitting around watching him, and, what if it took, then the 7th time he comes out, just clean. And I was thinking about, man, how many times do we just stop short? You just say, you know what, Carl, I already tried that. I tried praying to God. He never answered me. Yeah, but you were 1 time away. You're like this close. If you would have just hung on a little, trusted a little longer, maybe you would have seen God finally show up and do something huge. And you still can, by the way. It's not too late. But if you're feeling ready to give up trust in him, I just want to challenge you. Trust him all the way through. It's not enough for Naaman to just get in the water once, twice, even 6 times. God says 7, you got to do all 7. And so will you trust him all the way through to the end so that he can really show up and show his power? Jesus had that a lot with people. Go put mud on your eyes. Go wash in here. Go do this. Go tell this person this. And if they did it, then they saw God work in their life. Will you trust him there all the way to the end? And maybe you say, well, I haven't. I already screwed that part up. So I already lost God's chance to work on my life. Well, then let's land on this final part of the story here. It always comes down to grace. And the final piece of the story, Naaman comes out. He's cleansed. Amazing, right? Finally. My career's saved. My life's saved. Done with the stupid thing I've carried around my whole life. He goes to Elisha. And remember, we read earlier, brought all the gold, all the silver, all the clothes, and he tries to give it all to him. Payment. Here, take this, man of God, because you healed me. He tries to pay him for this healing, and Elisha refuses to take it. He's going to show Naaman, no, because real grace, you don't pay for. You just take it. Man, that's so countercultural for us, isn't it? It's so hard. I mentioned before when we've served a couple times at the OB Elementary School, and we'll do it again coming this fall. And, we never ask them to do it. You don't have to put up with the banners for our church or do any of this stuff. Like, we're just here to do it because we just believe this is what Jesus would do. And we're just trying to be people that live out our faith is what I tell them. And they're always like, well, what can we do for you? Can we give you guys something? Can we help? Can we advertise this? Can we do this for you? I say, you don't have to do anything. It's just grace. That's hard to accept, isn't it? Don't you want to pay people back when they do something for you? It's just hard. We're raised with this. There's no such thing as a free lunch. You want something done, you got to go do it yourself. Stuff is earned, respect is earned, and things are earned. And then it comes to grace. God says, here, you just take it. It doesn't cost you anything. It cost him. It's costly grace because it costs God everything in his son. But it doesn't cost us anything. And so we get to come to him to do that. But we have to come and decide if we're going to receive it or accept it or not. And here's my last thought on the Naaman story is, I think about, why didn't Elisha just come out and wave his hand and say abracadabra and now he's healed? Why make him do this whole thing going into the water? And what if it's because in order to get down in that water, Naaman had to strip off all of his armor that had been hiding all the leprosy and just come clean before who God is. And God says, and now you're ready to be healed. So Naaman, I don't know if he's in front of his servants or just in front of God, but either way, had to just kind of strip down and become clean. And then God could work in his life. Maybe that's what you got to do. Maybe that's where you're at, just coming clean, just saying, God, I do have this leprosy I've been hiding. And I have tried to admit that I don't need you, but I do need you. Maybe we just got to come clean before him so he can show up, do something in us. Even if I don't understand his ways, we already talked about that, and even if his ways make me angry, I don't know how many times the story Naaman got angry, but he trusted enough and did it. All right? Just get super practical real quick, all right? And then we'll pray. Here's a couple of practical ideas. How do I experience kind of God really doing something in me, kind of cleaning, restoring, something powerful? Well, one way, right out of the Naaman story, you can do what Naaman did and just go get wet. Just get in the water. Go get baptized. What a beautiful picture of getting to be baptized. Now, we believe it's actually God's grace that cleanses us from our sin. Nothing in the waters of Mission Bay are magical to do that to us. They are cleaner than the waters of the Jordan. But it is this beautiful picture of cleansing, though. If you read this story and just go, I love that, like you get to have that spiritual marker event in your life of just kind of the picture of the water, kind of washing that away, and you come up healed and restored. So we're doing that in early August on a Friday night, people from all New Break sites, and we'd love to do it with you. No matter your age, by the way, you're not too young if you're in this room, and you're not too old, because we baptize people of all ages, and it's a powerful step. So you could follow kind of Naaman in that. The second thing would be, what is that thing that God is just calling you to obey in? Just go to the river. Just go to Elisha. Just go do this. And you're like, but that doesn't make any sense. I've already tried that. I don't understand it. Will you trust him anyway? Enough to obey. Just take that step. I think a lot of us already know what it is. We just don't want to do it. But will you do it? Will you trust him enough to do that? Dip all 7 times. All right? And last, a way we can come to him just kind of clean, broken, and kind of invite God to do something in us is something we can all do even in this moment, which is communion, which we love doing here once a month. And that's a chance where we come to God and say, I do have a need for you. I remember that your grace is free, and I do bring my broken self to you. And Tommy will walk us through that. But what is that you need to do? God, just waiting. Just waiting. I'll leave you with these words. I'm reading this great book called Ruthless Trust right now. If you want to look it up, awesome book by a priest who's an alcoholic his whole life. And he writes some of the most beautiful spiritual stuff. And so Brennan Manning, Ruthless Trust. And he says, trust is our gift back to God. So that's what we give back to him. You don't have to pay him for it in anything. We give him our trust. He says that's what God values most. That's what Jesus actually died for, because he so wanted our trust. So let's pray together. God, we